Hi, good afternoon. My name is Vernadette Broyles, and I am the President and General Counsel of the Child and Parental Rights Campaign. And I have the wonderful privilege and honor to have represented January Littlejohn and her husband Jeff Littlejohn in the case of Littlejohn versus Leon County School District. So today, the Supreme Court of the United States ruled on our petition for certiorari, our cert petition, requesting the court to take our appeal from the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals. We finally received the decision that they have denied our petition, which means they're not going to hear our case. This is extremely disappointing. There's just no way around it. I understand that the court may feel it did what it needed to do in a case that was just before it a little while ago called the Mirabelli case, an emergency appeal on a stay of an injunction issued by the 9th Circuit Court of Appeals. The trial court had issued a great decision on behalf of the parents, but that decision was stayed by the 9th Circuit, and so the Supreme Court on an emergency petition reversed the stay. And so we ended up with a very good decision in Mirabelli on behalf of parental rights. It's likely that perhaps the court felt that it did all it needed to do. But in truth, why it's so disappointing is that the Littlejohn case was the perfect opportunity for the court to take a case that is not on an emergency docket, but that was fully briefed, and it was a case on the merits of parents' constitutional right to direct the upbringing of their child when their child rejects their sex and wants the school to treat them as something other than their sex. So we're disappointed. This was a missed opportunity. But I want to just ask January, we've walked with you for a number of years. What has this case meant to you and your family?
To answer that question, we have to go back to 2020. My daughter is 19 now. So much has happened since then. But in 2020, she was a vulnerable, confused 13-year-old little girl who desperately wanted to fit in and really was filled with self-loathing for her body, which a lot of adolescent girls are. And the school affirmed that self-hate. I'm very grateful to have been a part of shedding sunlight on this very insidious violation of parental rights that was occurring not just all over Florida, but all over the United States. And so I think part of my personal disappointment comes from knowing that these types of parental rights violations are still occurring. They're still harming families, and they're still creating a huge wedge in the parent-child relationship.
On the one hand, January, we know that the fight continues, but sometimes it's appropriate to stop and celebrate. The landscape is completely different from when we filed this case, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing I think, a point that I think is important to make, and you could make this far better than me, the facts of the case were never disputed. From 2020 to now, the landscape is vastly different. And, this is a national issue, and it's far from over. And you better than anyone know, we really reached a tipping point, especially in states like Colorado, California, Washington, Oregon, where Child Protective Services has been weaponized. They are actually removing trans-identified children from fit and loving parents for simply wanting to protect their children from these unproven medical interventions. And, reflecting back today, I'm filled with so many emotions. I'm filled with gratitude for the progress that we have made. I'm filled with the gratitude for all of the people, the incredible people that I've met along the way, including you and your firm. But I'm also filled with concern and fear for parents in those types of states that don't have protections like Florida.
In January, for those who still don't know the very basic facts of your case, can you just very briefly lay out what these school officials did behind your back?
Sure. So at age 13, our daughter came to my husband and I and told us she was confused about her sex. I had reached out to a teacher and let her know that our child was struggling, that we were not affirming this at home. And what we found was devastating. They had created what they call a gender support plan. It's really an official social transition plan.
7 pages long.
Yes. So they asked her which restroom and locker room she preferred to use, giving her the option to use the male facilities. They asked her which sex she preferred to room with on overnight field trips. And then they asked her, and all of these plans go through this same questioning, how should we refer to you when speaking to your parents? And this is to effectively deceive parents that these secret social transitions had ever taken place.
So, January, we talked about how the world is so very different from 6 years ago when you were facing this all alone, 4.5 years ago, 5 years ago when we filed this case. These things were happening in the dark. And so now, because of your efforts, our efforts, the efforts of our allies, what has been going on in the dark is now widely exposed. There are parents showing up in school boards all over the country. There are school boards that have flipped all over the country. There's legislation that has been proposed in different parts of the country. So let's not forget that your courage has borne great fruit on behalf of families.
Well, and courage is contagious. The vast majority of parents firmly believe that parents have the constitutional right to direct the upbringing of their children, which includes mental health and medical decisions. I do believe the Supreme Court will need to weigh in on one of these cases and make it very, very clear. I trust in God's timing on all things, including this, and only by the grace of God has my daughter been completely freed of confusion, and that is my utmost prayer for every parent and child who is struggling with this type of confusion, that they come to be comfortable in their God-given sex, that their parental bond is repaired and restored, and that they carry on with their life as God intended. We believe that children deserve to grow into adulthood with their bodies whole and intact, their fertility intact, so that they have the ability to make decisions as adults with their brains fully developed. I want to thank all the parents like Aaron Friday, Aaron Lee, Amber Levine, the Foote family. And I would have done it 10 times again. I don't regret one thing. The best thing about this situation for me as a mom is my kids now know I will fight for them. They know I will walk through fire for them.
It can't be said better than that. So I want to thank you, January, for the privilege of having represented you and stood with you and to continue to do so. Thank you, and God bless you.